you're going to cross state lines to go dancing, do it listening to 2-on-1, the internet's top sensation, where we're cutting loose about Footloose today. I'm your co-host, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm your other co-host, the Reverend Stephanie Kendall, and I will cross state lines to dance with you any day, my friend.
Well, so we're going to talk about the big stuff, of course, with our guest today. But did you notice that this movie took place in the part of Kansas you definitely have not been to, with mountains and hills?
To be fair, I did not realize until you just said it that it took place in Kansas. So,
I'm pretty sure it takes place in Kansas. It seems.
I have no idea. The deuces, we are doing Footloose today. You'll hear a little bit more, but I had not seen it until this week.
And if you want to follow or not follow, but read Spiff's thoughts about this, we're going to retweet her live tweet of it through the 2-on-1 account if we haven't already, because it's worth reading. It's hilarious if you've seen the movie or if you haven't. But before we get to all of that today, I do want to take a moment to talk to you about Jeff Wunrow Designs, because we're recording this in April, and we're just after Easter, and you know what that means liturgically, right?
It's almost Advent?
It's almost Advent. We've been friends for 3 years and you've figured this one out. It's almost Advent. Friends, you have only about 6 months. The big swath of ordinary time is looming, but it gets smaller every week. You only have about 6 months to really plan out and prepare for all new vestments, all new liturgical textiles, all new everything from Jeff Wunrow Designs. They've for 16 years have been making ordinary time extraordinary through the creation of paraments, altar accessories, banners, copes, stoles, and of course the occasional mitre as well.
It is incredible how much Jeff actually does and what Jeff actually brings to the theological spaces and the faith spaces that he helps us cultivate and curate. It is beautiful. If you are someone that needs a stole, know someone that needs a stole, know someone that needs anything that Jeff Wunrow does, head on over to jeffwunrow.com, jeffwunrow.com. Look at that, I did it. And check out his entire catalog, as Arthur already said. But if you are in the need for a stole, our deuces, you know, you have a 15% off coupon that works, and we know it because you keep telling us that you keep using it, and I've used it, and Arthur's used it. But that is 2-on-1 15 for 15% off your entire stole order. It is in a graphic right below us at this moment. But if you are listening online, 2-on-1, which 2-on-1 are all letters, 15 are numbers. So it's 2-on-1 15 for 15% off your whole stole order.
It's an incredible coupon and a fantastic deal. We also encourage you to check out the catalog at jeffwunrow.com, because you'll notice as you prepare for Advent, you can use a lot of this purple stuff for Lent as well if you're a smart shopper. But I say you should buy a different stole for every week of Lent and give up not looking fabulous next year with your Jeff Wunrow stoles. We thank Jeff for being our lead sponsor.
Speaking to my 3 nature, just look good. New stole every Sunday.
New stole every Sunday. And of course, my 7 nature, which is more is better. Right. Footloose today with our friend, the Reverend Nathan Hill, who is joining us in the studio. And there he is. Nathan, welcome to 2-on-1.
It's great to be here. It's good to see you two on this gorgeous day.
Nathan, tell us, it is nice to meet you, and thank you for coming on the show. We were just talking a little bit before about how this was my first time watching Footloose, which shocking as a theater kid, like who grew up in the 80s. Like I just, there's a large gap in my movie watching knowledge. But talk to us a little bit about why Footloose. Like what does it mean to you? What do you like about it? What have you watched? Like talk to us about Footloose.
We also want to know like who you are. Where do you serve?
Okay,
yes,
sure.
Of course.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so Nathan Hill, I'm the pastor at University Christian Church in Hyattsville, Maryland, right outside of DC. Not, really right outside the DC line, in Prince George's County. A great place to live, a great ministry that we have. Married, 2 kids. My daughter, she wants to move to New York City someday. We'll talk about that maybe, but she has dreams of going to Columbia. So, fine. But originally from Oklahoma, which is going to weave into this question about Footloose. So yeah, born and raised in Oklahoma. All my family's sort of back there. Actually, I have a sister now in Nashville. They just moved out that way, so a little bit closer to us. Involved in the church at large as well, the regional church here, and in the Disciples General with the Reconciliation Ministry. I'm one of the co-chairs of our commission right now, the Reconciliation Commission, and do some anti-racism training. And I do some soccer blogging, and I have my own podcast about soccer.
You were speaking my language, friend.
Yeah. I was in Dallas as an associate pastor for a few years and fell in love with FC Dallas, and I still follow them and go to their media calls, talk to the coaches, do some light soccer journalism.
A big Pepe fan?
Yeah. So it's fun. It's fun. So in fact, we'll do that tonight. But of course, folks can follow me. I'm on Twitter at Nathan J. Hill. I'm on Instagram as Rev Nathan. So I also skateboard, and I just doing a lot of community organizing lately here in the county, and that theme may come up too.
He's like the quintessential cool guy.
Yeah, very cool.
Oh, I'm flattered. I'm flattered because my kids would disagree with you. But that's when you have teenagers. It's my daughter. She sometimes thinks I'm a little sketchy. I said, okay. I was there too. I remember that too.
So speaking of sketchy, Footloose.
Oh, so I tell my kids all the time, like I say to them, and I'm not serious, and I'm serious. I don't know how I thread that all the time, but there's so many things in life I'm not serious at all about, and yet I'm deadly serious. So I say to my kids, 80s movies are objectively better than other movies. There's no era, and yes, come at me. We can. No,
we don't come at people. We invite and I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm excited for this conversation.
But because I know there's a lot of bad movies in the 80s, but there's something about 80s, and I'm sure it's just because that's my coming of age of music. I had a family member who ran a movie studio in Hannibal, Missouri, and he would send us copies of movies hot off the press or whatever. Somehow, I don't know how he did it, but we'd get these. And so we would get to watch them every few months. He'd send some of the latest things. So Goonies and Willow, of course, all the Star Wars movies, just this era. But even all these like Footloose and that Harrison Ford one, Witness, which is kind of strange, Beverly Hills Cop. There's all this era movie. Now, of course, a lot of bad movies, but it mixed in there. But I just say to my kids, 80s movies, there's something about the synth soundtracks, sometimes cheesy music, the fashion, just the over the top elements of the storytelling. And Footloose is an example of that. I think Footloose is a mess of a movie, but there's just something about it that is so just outrageous. And it doesn't know what it is. I mean, it's this really, there's a compelling story.
I'm going to cut you off on that one because I like that. It's outrageous and it doesn't know what it is. So one of the questions that Spiff had on Twitter, as she live tweeted it, was she was like, this movie is not good. Is it so bad it's good? Or what? How did you phrase the categories? It's like you had 4 different points.
I asked, is it good? Is it good, bad? Is it bad, good? Or is it just bad? Because it's not just good.
And I think with outrageous and it doesn't know what it is, I'm going to draw a line between congregational ministry and Footloose right here. Do you need to have a mission statement in order to function? Because somebody was like, what if dancing was banned? And they made Footloose. And do we need to have a clear vision, or do we just need to have we should break bread together once a week?
It's an interesting. By the way, Footloose is loosely based on a true story. Elmore City, Oklahoma, banned dancing in the late 70s. You can go Google this up. And a group of kids were getting ready for their prom, say kids like high school students, and they lobbied the city council which was led that time by a preacher, by a pastor, to overturn it. The people are still alive. There's an interview with them about the story. I don't think it gets credited like on the Wikipedia page. I don't think they credit the story directly, and it certainly doesn't have one. I don't remember. Footloose doesn't have based on a true story opening placard, right? No. But it's funny because according to that story, or at least according to legend, is that the council was split with one deciding vote cast was an old rancher who voted in favor of removing the ban and said, let them dance. let them dance, and so
I love that.
So Elmore City, Oklahoma. So that's also one of the reasons why I think it reminds me of home. I mean,
Sure.
well, I'll tell one more thing I tell my kids. I'm sure y'all have heard this too. Most stories, there's that old line that there's only two kinds of stories in the world, right? A stranger comes to town, someone goes on a journey. You think about all these movies, Lord of the Rings. I mean, what is it? Fellowship of the Ring, someone goes on a journey, right? Edward Scissorhands, another great movie.
Stranger Comes to Town. That's good.
No, Stranger Comes to Town changes things. I mean, so much of the gospel story kind of fits this pattern too of disciples going on a journey with Jesus, and Jesus also coming in and being that stranger and disrupting the status quo. So Footloose has sort of that thing, but what it can't decide what it wants to be. Is this a movie about Kevin Bacon dancing, being this urban, edgy guy who wears a tie on his first day of school? Oh my gosh, this and shaking things up. Or is it about the journey of a pastor confronting his grief and the fact that he hasn't dealt with his stuff, right?
So that's one of the things that I named in my Twitter feed last night was I said, I'm sorry, but is this whole movie about a pastor's mental health? Like, how am I just knowing about this? And like, should this movie, I thought, had like a real moment. I was like, should this movie be shown in like as part of our like boundary training? Because I was like, he is just like, a pulpit is not a therapist, and he is just like working his stuff out on his people.
To the point where he's actually shocked that they listen to him. Like with the book burning at the end, we are a spoilers podcast. He's like, "Why would you burn books?" Because you literally said God would obliterate these in a realm of fire. Like there's, sticking a spoke in the bicycle and blaming it on someone else.
It's a terrible preaching too. Like that opening starts like, dude, you have no ending to this sermon. Like, what is going on here?
The pianist literally cuts him off, but then he's working on a typewriter, but he didn't use a manuscript in the beginning. So like, sorry.
Well, I guess I'm curious what y'all think about them. One, is this a movie just about a pastor's mental health? I mean, not just solely, but at the root of this movie, could we claim that this is like, hey, everyone, go watch this to make sure, one, your pastor's not doing this, and two, to make sure you know how to support your pastor. And if you are the pastor, to make sure you aren't doing this. Is this movie about that? And I'm curious what you all think about, because the thing that drove me nuts about this whole thing, I was like, first of all, John Lithgow I love, but was like, an entire city in which I am the only an entire city in which I am is full of all of my congregants might be my nightmare. Like, I love my people so deeply, but I need that step back for my own health and boundary reasons. But like, in a part of me kind of understood this whirlwind that the pastor was in, because he has nobody there to say, like, what am I doing? He has no one to bounce anything off of, because they're all his congregants.
A good disciples church, evidently. And like, where's the regional minister? I mean, come on now.
They are so obviously an independent church.
I was like, my very first tweet was, is this a disciples movie that also no one told me about? Like, wild.
Isn't it? Yeah. And I'm with you. And like, although I know too, like, these kinds of events that kind of underpins this movie, the thing that you slowly gets kind of peeked out there. And that really probably, is the catalyst for all this, but is that death, that the pastor's son died in a car accident, shattered the community. And those things happen. There are communities where they're so tight knit that when there's this accident, there's this, it devastates a whole community. And here is this community that doesn't know what to do with this grief, and a pastor who really in that role should be leading them, or at least should be taking time off to deal with stuff. It is instead trying to control things, which is what sometimes we do with our grief. I mean, so one of my theories is that, so much of our conflicts in the world, and even the roots of oppression and all the isms, are often about unresolved grief, like unresolved things that we just haven't dealt with. And I'm probably wrong on this, but I think so many like wars and things, they go back to these things where someone feels wronged. Look at what Russia is doing to the Ukrainian people right now. I mean, there's some kind of Putin, there's some kind of grief over what was lost, and he wants to reclaim it. He wants to, and it's impossible. We can't do that. I mean, there's so much of life we cannot control. And so this pastor and these townsfolk, they seem to want to provide this safe and secure existence for their community, and in the end end up choking life out of it, and hurting the people that they even claim to love. And there's something for a lot of pastors, I think, that resonates with me on a pastoral level because I could see that tendency to want to control things, and especially as a white man.
Sure. And people listen to us. Like one of the things that through this movie, we keep seeing is people listen to the pastor, and there's an authority there that we are granted as people, as faith leaders, that it's humbling to earn, but is also quite it can be scary when people continue to listen to you in deep and meaningful ways that you want, obviously, but that every little thing, it's why I think I was like, oh gosh, an entire town that's my congregation. That sounds awful, because I need people to bounce ideas off of it. My people need to hear diverse thought and experiences. Watching this movie, I think, and this is where I'd push back on 80s movies being the best, although I do love them. I'm not saying that I don't love them, but I was like, I grew up in San Francisco and I live in New York City, and I call LA home. So for me, like, diversity in people is just, I was like, and I watched this, I was like, this is an entire white group of people. Like, I've just never been in an entire white space like that before. And it just feels so, the whole thing felt so foreign. It was like all, like very, I don't know, there was no diversity at all. And
no.
And then also, no dancing and no fun. And I was like, and the two very much equated to each other. I was like, there's no culture, there's no diversity, there's no laughter, there's no joy. But there's a lot of mental health issues.
So can we
go ahead?
Can we talk about Ariel? Speaking of which, I find it interesting that the preacher has a daughter who doesn't have a biblical name. He seems like the kind of guy who would have named his daughter like Hepzibah. But there she is as Ariel. Ariel, of course, being the chaotic spirit from The Tempest, most famously. And as this predates The Little Mermaid, and she doesn't collect forks. I think it's supposed to be a Shakespearean reference about The Tempest. She is tempestuous, to say the least. One, and we'll put a content warning on the front of this episode. So she gets just the snot knocked out of her by her boyfriend at one point. There's a lot of abuse in this movie of Ariel, and a lot of abuse of Ariel by Ariel. Why does nobody know something's wrong? Like, why does no one seem to care that this girl is clearly spiraling and is clearly being abused? Why does no one act on this?
Oh, and remember the scene, where she jumps between moving cars, which is like
right in the beginning.
Doing? Like, what in the world?
How else is she supposed to get a boyfriend? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know. But she's definitely, it's a cry for help. I mean, she's definitely acting out. And I know in these small towns, PKs, pastor kids, preacher kids, whatever, can have that, like that they have this reputation or this image that they feel like they have to hold up against. So they do everything they can at times to disassociate themselves from that reality. But the father is clueless. The mom is in the midst of grief, and she's a character that, really,
she's the best character.
Yeah.
She's like the only redeemable character in that entire movie.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's bring it back. I said I'd bring it back. We started years ago, 2-on-1 had the can these people be redeemed question. and we
so were optimistic in our first season, Nathan.
Yeah, we were. and these people all feel really real to me. So it's not like, when we're talking about the other questions, when we're like, can Lucifer be redeemed? Which is, I think still a really good question, but these people, I feel like we all know these people. And yet there's some really toxic traits, and there's some things. Can the characters in this movie that are just pretty terrible, and really, I think it's mostly a cry for help. So there's that caveat. can they be redeemed and what is necessary for their redemption? I'll think of Ariel. Ariel continues to put herself in harm's way, like literal, like physical, like deathly danger, assuming other people will save her all the time, right? Kevin like comes and grabs her. The guy pulls her from the car like several times. That's like one of her like things that she does. And it's stressful. It's stressful to watch. It's stressful to be like, why? And she laughs it off and does not care about other people's experiences or opinions or emotions around this. And I found her until I realized everything, and I was like, oh, she just needs a lot of help. I also was just like, I don't like this character. I don't like her. I would not be friends with her. I don't know. What do you all think?
Definitely. If there was there was a sequel, I hope it would be about that family going to family counseling to begin unpacking.
Footloose too, counseling.
Yeah, but as a whole system, I mean, it's a whole system at work here. And so I think, that's one of our understandings, right, of what liberation really means is if Ariel's can be redeemed, it also means her dad needs to be on that journey. And, even the town and the community needs to come to terms with how to approach life and how to honor the past and remember your loved ones and grieve, but also move forward without using your grief as an excuse to, oppress others and hurt others. So I would hope that these characters could be redeemed. I think you see a glimmer of it. And of course, this gift that Kevin Bacon offers this community of dance as a way to live your grief, a way to not an outlet that's not sitting in church and burning books. And
what would your montage be of, like, you're in an 80s movie and like, because Kevin Bacon's Ren character was like, he montaged like dancing of feelings, angry, like, so you're processing your life. What is your montage in an 80s movie, and what is the song that plays?
Oh, well,
the song choices of this movie were so good.
So good. I mean, just so good.
Let's hear it for The Boy and Footloose were both nominated for Best Original Song.
Such good stuff. The opening credits, I mean, just a bold choice.
It is a bold choice.
It was very John Hughesy without being.
Yeah. But mine, of course, would be skateboarding. And of course, those 80s movies also exist. Thrashing.
Yeah.
Gleaming the Cube. Also, I think Gleaming the Cube may have been 90s. But definitely and similar things of like this montage of me skateboarding. And of course, that's how I already do it. If I have a tough day, if I can go and sweat and be creative, get my mind on something else, I usually come back, whatever it was that was bothering me, I'm able to leave it behind and face anew my issue, my challenge. It's important for my self-care. But and of course, music wise, oh gosh, that's a great question. I'd have to maybe even look at my music list and see like what do I listen to often.
It has to be an 80s song. It has to be a song.
But it has to be an 80s song, right?
Arthur, what about you?
Mine would be a baking montage. But I would want like backlit. So like when I throw flour down on the dough, you get the big like poof, which I guess hello to our British listeners. I would do actually my favorite one is Time After Time. So it would make no sense because it's not like Up, but I love Time After Time, or One Way or Another.
But none of these songs make sense in their montage. They're just like, my favorite thing was they were just like, Tractor Chicken to Hero, go.
Right. I'm rolling up for a hero. Oh,
it was so good.
So good. So good.
So good. I think mine would be like sermon prep, where I'm just like frantically exegeting and like throwing paper everywhere, but it would be to Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark. And
it's such a good one.
If like with a stack of books, like aggressively reading the commentary.
It's all that is around me every day. So I feel like.
Well, forgive my digression. We got to talk.
Those are all good choices. Yeah, I mean, a Springsteen, but my problem is I like some of his older stuff too. So it's always hard to remember what came out in the 80s or not. But
and I was just like, I don't know when. I was gonna Google it. I'm a big Springsteen fan, so it was going to be Springsteen no matter what. It's just, is it Dancing in the Dark? Is it Born to Run? Is it, Born in the USA? Like a good, like Justice-y, like that, So I'm a big Springsteen fan. I feel like the real question is, in our montage, whatever it may be, what is the random thing that gets thrown in, like gymnastics, like casual gymnastics?
This random warehouse in Footloose.
Why are they always doing gymnastics?
Great gymnastic bars in there. I don't know.
And they're all very good at it.
Well, and let's also not forget, when Ren was cut from the gymnastics team, like I grew up in the 90s and I did swimming and I was called gay a lot. And yet none of them are being particularly homophobic about guys who wear tight clothing for gymnastics. So either this town is a little more progressive than like the curve of folks, or not.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to throw that one out there.
This definitely feels like, sometimes it's like the big city people come and do a movie about, or a show about small town folk, and they get it totally wrong, right? Oh, well, obviously they have a gymnastics program. Okay, all right.
Yeah, right.
That all the guys are just
a
like
team that like you have to get cut from.
Right. It's competitive, but
very competitive gymnastics.
State championship, 5 years.
To Odessa or to Titan, yeah.
But the town is called Beaumont. But I don't think it's spelled like Beaumont, Texas. And of course, I always assumed it was supposed to be in Texas, but you have this majestic backdrop of mountains in the background. I'm like, there's no part of Texas that looks like that to me.
It's Western,
maybe the Southwest, right?
It's severely Western Kansas, so we all lived in DFW. For those of you who don't understand Texas, like Dallas Fort Worth Dallas doesn't consider itself part of Texas. Like, it's just not. Fort Worth does, but like Dallas people forget that they live in Dallas. Or rather that they live in Texas. And like Western Kansas, I've noticed, is different from Eastern Kansas. I'm no expert. I live in Wichita, which is the bubble, but it's like geographically, these people are Coloradans. They just happen to live in Kansas. That's why they cross over to Colorado to do fun stuff.
And of course, this movie was actually shot in Utah, which explains the demographics of the town, because there are towns, even in Oklahoma and all kinds of places where the demographic, the census data is like 99.5% white, and you're like, what's the 0.5%? I wonder what
right.
Who is that person?
Who is that one human? Where are they? Okay.
Yeah, can we check in on them?
Can we check on them?
But yeah, because so I always, because that's another thing I do like about a good movie. It's some of my issue too with some of the Avengers and stuff like that. Some of the newer green screen stuff is like, location is a character in a good film, and I think we can. And this film, in a way, is a Western. It's not, but it's on this Western backdrop, right? Yeah, and there's definitely the chicken on a tractor scene, which was one of the great traditions of the American West.
But he comes into town on his weird looking horse that happens to be a W bug, and everybody sees him, and everybody knows him.
Right.
That's good. It's a Western.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, no. So in preparation for that, like if it's a Western, and I want to talk more about the genre type thing. And I do want us to engage a little theologically about this in terms of what the church is and isn't prepared for. I like what the church is moving forward to. So I have a theory about gymnastics and I have a theory about Westerns that I'm going to try to combine into what I like to call Arthur's ridiculous questions. So ministries oftentimes emerge because of need. Like folks, the best ministries are the ones that folks just start doing. There's not really planning. There's catch up. So maybe just a bunch of young men and women in Beaumont realized that they were very limber, or that like they were already subversively kind of teaching dancing, because what is a floor routine if not love persevering? So, oh wait, sorry, WandaVision on the brain. What is a floor routine if not dance? And watching them all dance together at the end, you're like, well, there's a choreographer somewhere. Like, you guys have been practicing. So what if what the church, and we don't have to talk about specific congregations, and I'm going to say the church as in white mainline American Protestantism, what are we prepared for? What are our gymnasts who are breaking in and they have like parallel bars to do it, right? I don't know. I had a good question, but that wasn't it.
What you like, what is bubbling? What is
bubbling? What do we see happening in the next 10, 15 years as these gymnasts are seeking a place to choreograph?
It's a great question.
I think it's going to be the place where people actually go to be socially proximate to one another. I think that is what the church can offer in an increasingly divisive and an increasingly isolating world. I really think the future is dinner church, where at least once a week you're with people, and once a week you're sharing a meal, and once a week. Because what did people need 100 years ago, where we still have our models of this going? They needed to come together in community and have public worship. And now it's probably going to be they need to come together and have public community. That's going to be the montage.
I'm on board with that. And
I have the tiger passing plates.
Right. Oh, wow.
Rye or the Kaiser passing plates. Let's just bring in Weird Al.
You do look at that. I wonder. So one of the things that I saw in this movie, like that, I was just like, oh, this is wholly unbelievable. But again, it's film, so whatever. And I tweeted about it last night. And I was like, this is what the church needs. So in the history, I don't know if you have all experienced this, but in the history of me working with humans, a group of people have never overnight gone from a more conservative thought process to a less conservative thought process on just like, yeah, let's do it. You know what I mean? Kind of like in a 1 week's time, like after one sermon, does an entire group of people, especially parents. Having done youth ministry, youth parents are never going to be like, all on board here and then all on board here after 1 week's time. Just unrealistic. However, I was like, that's what this movie has to teach the church, is how much more we can get done if we don't keep hanging ourselves up with the nitty gritty of like the last remaining person to make sure every one person is on, if we just try it. Like, obviously, if something else happened at this dance and their fears were, God forbid other children died, they'd be like, well, never again, like leave it for the next generation to pick up and try again. But they were willing to try and they were willing to try quickly. Because all of this happens pretty relatively quickly, right? Like he comes into town, let's dance. Oh my gosh, what's happening? There's this whole thing. And then there's a vote and it's like, yeah, let them dance and see what happens. Now, Grant, so I don't know, what do you guys think, or do you think the church has something to learn from making quicker movements?
Yeah, learning how to get to that yes more often. I mean, and
yeah,
I remember a time when I was in college and with the campus ministry, we had an ecumenical campus ministry, and it was a great place for us to be, great relationships. But we wanted to do some kind of event, but we don't have the money for it, and we were like kind of out of our imagination, like we're done, like, okay, we can't do it. But then our leaders were like, wait a minute, let's just talk about, what about this? Because we need all these things to happen. Well, maybe we can get this donated. Maybe, yeah, like I even shared it on my sermon on Sunday that I'm always reminded that even as my church, all of our churches, our faith communities, we're not just this group of people, at this location, but we have relationships that stretch far and wide, and we forget about that. But that's part of our stewardship. It's part of our understanding of the relationships, our gift. And so, like, I love the character. He's kind of the best, like one of the nicer, more down to earth characters is the the business owner, the feed grain guy, who hires the kids, and he's just sort of like, crazy talk in this town, and I'm just out here doing my thing. And you can use our dance floor, and we can, he just says yes. He comes to a yes. They have relationships. Even the kids can't see the relationships and resources that are there, that offer possibilities for how they can go forward. And so certainly for the church, we do look at our budgets. We look at our building, our aging building. We look at our dwindling numbers or whatever it is. And we say, oh, we can't do anything. And it's like, really? Well, just because we want to do, someone doesn't have to be a member of our church to be part of a community effort that we're doing, or to be engaged in a project or resource to bless our community, or be there, or be in solidarity. So I keep learning that. So even for me, I keep learning that and keep being surprised myself by the possibilities that are out there if we would dare to ask, to listen, Yeah.
Absolutely.
Huh. I mean, I really like that. Like I'll admit, when I talked about what are the gymnast things, what are the gymnastics waiting to happen and this and that, I'm trying to be more positive because, Nathan, I don't know if you've listened to this show a lot, but usually I'm like, so the church is broken and we're all going to die soon. But I say so in a fun and irreverent kind of fashion. I'm trying to be more optimistic about that because we have to learn how to say yes to one another, which is so much more dangerous and provocative than no. And it's so the preacher, and I love John Lithgow. He's my absolute favorite actor. I watched Third Rock from the Sun in syndication till like yesterday. It's at the end, he doesn't say yes to dancing. He just stops saying no. And why do we keep thinking that the church has to say no instead of just not? If the church doesn't say no, it doesn't have to say yes. It just doesn't have to say no. I think it's a challenge.
It's good stuff. And going back to Stephanie, to your piece earlier, this movie can't decide what it wants to be. It's almost like, is this a movie about a pastor? But the pastor has enormous influence. I mean, I do like that part of the movie where they have all these segments of him meeting with the ladies club or whatever, and all these, he's around, and it shows his pastoral care, his relationship, his concern for people, how he's good at what he does. I mean, and he has power. And sometimes, and I know this comes up in anti-racism work sometimes, right? When I talk with folks, like, we trick one of the lies of white supremacy is that for white folks is that we benefit from the system and we can't do anything about it. Like we're both given power and we really don't have power, which it just doesn't make sense. So that's why sometimes white folk, we get all, oh, it's just too big of a problem and there's nothing I can do. It's just the way it is, the way the world, instead of, wait a minute, we have power, we have resources. Even our faith communities, we may not be but 20 people or whatever, or, we may not be as big as mega churches, but we have power and influence. How do we use that? And we can use it for evil, we can use it as we see in the Footloose movie, or for good things. We can let people dance. We can encourage people to embrace life.
There was one lady in the town meeting before the pastor's wife died, right? Before she shut it down, the boy needs to talk, or however she said it. There was one lady where I was like, you belong in midnight mass. Like, she was just immediately just like, me. And it's I liked the marriage between Lithgow and what's her name? Diane. What's her name? Diane Wiest played.
Diane Wiest.
Yes. I liked their dynamic. I thought that was like a genuinely healthy and thoughtful and good relationship. And it was the only one.
I will admit, at the end, I was watching what happened, and there may be I live in New York, there's sirens everywhere. But even in his credits, he gets Reverend Shaw Moore. And I was like, it's my alma mater who ordained me rarely even puts Reverend Stephanie Kendall on it, like, let alone film credits. I was like, this patriarchy is already in on the credits.
Yeah.
But I loved V is her character name, but then V Moore's character. And I was like, we need to name that, like, church mothers and, you know, pastor spouses being primarily historically women, especially within the Black church, are, you know, I was like, they need to cite all the foremothers of this woman who is using, like, her liberative power in such a way that is just and, like, equitable for these people. And I was like, we've seen this in the church forever. We are not making we're expected as white people watching a white movie to say, like, how radical she is, and yet, like, we know historically, like, that has been a role that pastors' wives have played and continue to play even now.
Well, and we should point out the soft power, hard power dynamic as well. The soft power is what works in this movie, except the fight at the very end, which felt like
totally unnecessary. Oh, I was watching. I was like, "What? I thought those guys left. I thought they moved towns or something." But that's still
right.
Got to tie up the loose ends.
They couldn't end it with, like, the Christ character kind of blessing the Reverend and his wife, right? They had to, like, have a 80s action movie thing that literally included holding the head and punching somebody. Which, Nathan, you've seen the Three Ninjas, right?
Oh yeah.
It's and Spiff, have you? Because is that
like the one with the kids?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was like the Three Ninjas fight scene. Like,
yes,
Kevin Bacon, he literally did, like, a flying jump kick into it.
At the end of the movie, I think I summarized it as dance kick, real kick, glitter is, like, the last 5 minutes of the movie.
But soft power is what seems to work in this, you know. And I was thinking about this. So we're installing security cameras at the church, though they're not going live until we write a policy with the elders. And the elders are like, what if we just don't ever finish the policy? What if we just keep unwinding the tapestry forever? We started the conversation, and it wasn't a screaming and yelling in a board meeting. It was, you know, I used the pulpit not to be like, you should elect me to town council so we can have a surveillance state. It was I was robbed, and I still don't think we should have security cameras, and I'm the one who has to check my credit every day for the next 3 years. It's I'm going to go talk to your dad and just be like, grief is weird, and I don't know what God's plan is for my dad leaving or your son dying, and I'm sorry that it happened.
Yeah.
Does the church actually have the opportunity to just say is it really all just based in relationship? I don't know.
Nathan?
Well, let me weave in a couple of things, because as I think, and I look at my picture on my screen, you know, and we go back to this Western. You know, that's so I'm working on my doctorate ministry at Phillips Theological Seminary, and the focus is
home of the fighting vampires.
Yeah, that's one of my and my focus is on the doctrine of discovery. It is westward expansion. It's colonization, conquest, indigenous communities, and specifically Disciples Church and our history with that. And it's very personal for me. My home church was one of when the land was divvied up from the Wichita Caddo people, taken back from them. They first had this sort of common holding of land for their reservation. And then the government said, no, we want to divvy this up and give it to white folk, you know. And so divvied up smaller sections. The surplus then was based auctioned out, you know, kind of a thing. And one of my home church first, like for $1, church extensions bought a board of church extension bought the plot of land for the church to go before there was even a church there. And that happened all throughout Oklahoma. But also my where I grew up, my home deed has a Comanche girl's name on it. It was deeded to her through the government. She died when she was 6 and went to a family member, and the family member sold it to a rancher. And eventually, you know, we grew up on a little piece of that. So just doing a lot of my own self reflection and the way that these stories and the narratives of the West, of manifest destiny, of all this, it just papers over things. It papers over grief. And Western movies are a myth as much as they come, because the West was not one in a sense. There were already people living there. The West was at best conquered. People were slaughtered. Indigenous communities were destroyed. There was genocide. Land was taken. People were uprooted. Lives were lost. But so even the West is a whole has been this myth to help white people feel okay, to put a frame around our history and not have to deal with the actual nitty gritty, painful reality. So there's something about this movie that always gets me, because it is, the location is a character, but like this pattern that white people do, where we do everything we can to paper over stuff, to not deal with our stuff, and to tell little narratives that, and religion can be that. Our faith can be that. Our faith can be an attempt to say this world has got to make sense. So I'm just going to believe X, Y, and Z, and that's it. To understand this, even the Westward Expansion, this whole process of taking land, of divvying up land, in her book Patricia Limerick on Legacy of Conquest, she says that a true Western movie would be about the land office, the land grant office, not about gunslingers and farmers and ranchers. It's about who has the deed to the land, resources of land, mining, oil, all those kinds of things. So there's in this process, this white supremacy model of looking at the world, where land is something that we shape, force to our own whim, to get whatever we want, extract our resources out of. And I think even that's, the pastor in this movie, Footloose, he wants to lock everything down along with these townsfolk, to keep everyone safe, to keep this world that has unraveled for him under control. And it fails him. It doesn't relieve his grief. It doesn't help him better understand the world, to be a better pastor. It leads to pain. It leads to kids in the community doing harmful things instead of having love and care for each other. And so there's even something about this movie is on the backdrop of a larger grief. Of course, the movie doesn't get into, but yet as Americans, we need to confront, we need to dig, we need to tear off the paper and look deep at the blood in the soil and the real stories and things, how this has all shaped us.
So is Footloose almost cursed by the way that, like, part of the reason that this movie exists, part of the reason why these town councils are acting in such a way, is that we've never done the systemic work of grief and reconciliation? Like, is the suggestion that this town will never be functional until we name our white supremacy? Because that's kind of my favorite hot take on Footloose ever, I have to admit. Like,
yeah,
I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
Really good. That's thoughtful. That's wise.
There's a reason why you don't see. I don't think we saw any people of color in the movie.
No, not one.
And of course, what person of color wants to move to a town that outlawed dancing? I mean, come on, like what's the point of that? But yeah, power. I mean, how we use our power. And look, so much of our politics right now, I mean, the whole MAGA thing is just, we got to control. We can't have people who have, are different gender or what, have different gender expressions or sexuality. We can't, we got to lock it down. And, we can't, there's so much of this is this reactionary inability to deal with the fact that the world is complex and painful and difficult and bigger than we realize.
But the chilling thing too is they stopped listening to music because dancing is outlawed. And without music, then, I know we all know the joke about why are Baptists against dancing, because it can lead to foot tapping and that leads to sex. But like, what is the chilling effect that we have if we don't address the systems of why we ban things and why we stop things? And maybe honestly, the people of color have moved away from that town because of the dancing ban that's been in place for years and years. And what if that's part of it? What if that's an underlying...
that the dancing is not the sole reason in which they move out of town?
But what if there's a really kind of insidious thing? Like, what if we do ask the question, where are the people of color in this small town? Where's 0.5%? Where's the guy who runs the only good Mexican restaurant in all of Western Kansas?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that I think that Nathan really has been hitting on really faithfully and wonderfully is, you know, the weaponization of perfectionism within white supremacy. And one of the things that I noticed, so one of the very first things I didn't tweet this. So here's my hot take, and it is not theological, but I could make it. So my hot take is, it was noticeable that there was no music at the very beginning. There was no score. There was nothing. It was silent, like a world of silence as they drove and they, you know, lived life together. And it felt incomplete, right? The movie, like if you were just to watch that portion of the movie, it felt incomplete. However, a song in and of itself, if you're just like, here is this song, it doesn't always need picture with it. A song can be complete. So I'm going to say that the Grammys are the better award to win, that it is the exceptional musical talent, because a song can be complete, but audiovisual, the AV take on Emmys, Golden Globes, and Oscars are inferior to the Grammys because they create things that can be complete, but you cannot have music and you cannot have television and movies without music. That was my weird side hot take, but I want to get back to the perfectionism that is there, because one of the things that this movie does really well is it does not actually perfectly pair, or maybe it does, music and the scenes that keep happening. It's a little chaotic into the background, the music choices that they have made for some of these scenes.
No,
and do we spend
hero is appropriate for literally any situation, and I will.
Yes, especially chicken tractor or tractor chicken. But my question is, do we spend too much time in the church trying to make things perfect, finding the right song and the right scripture for the right time and moment? And, you know, as I even said earlier, my sermons are like, is this the right thing and whatever? And is that in turn, that kind of perfectionism, something that we can let go of if we look at how we still value things like this movie, right? We love this, like you said earlier, this movie is beloved and yet has so many problems, and yet we still love it. It is not perfect, and yet there is love there. Can we as the church hold on to whatever that is and use that for the good work of God?
Rich question. Yeah, I've really been ruminating on this article from Christian Century. I think Christian Century, Christian Century. That it went around viral. One of you may have shared it. I forgot how I saw it, but it was about from a homiletics professor who brings in a Japanese playwright to work with their students every year. And it's a wonderful article. And this playwright tells them a few things, like one, preachers, like pastors, you know, embrace your weird. Like you're part of the church. The church is weird. Like there's a certain level we should explain who we are, what baptism and communion means. But like for disciples, we stand up there, we say, this is the bread is Jesus says my body, the cup is my blood. And, you know, that's kind of weird, you know, like on a surface level, like, you know, people are like, what, you know, what does that mean? And then, you know, we need to explain things and stuff, but there's also a level that's always just going to be weird, but also said, under prepare. He said under prepare, which is the thing. Oh, my like seminary would always thought, you know, you do. So in other words, do your work. He says like basically do your work, prepare theologically, do your study of the scripture as you prepare to preach, but leave room for the unexpected, leave room for the messiness. And I've been trying to live into that. I have used manuscripts almost all the time, and I still do a manuscript, but I leave bullet points in more often, or I just go away from it if I'm just feeling that. And I think during this pandemic, hopefully we've learned that lesson again, that sometimes people are really remember when things don't go right, and we laugh about it. And we remember that, hey, you know, this isn't about perfection. Yeah. It's just about worship, and worship is messy, you know, and weird sometimes. So yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. And because I think you're right. I think, and this article also just points out the live streaming that we're in the midst of. Like people do watch these live streams, and on these live streams, it's not always glitzy and glamorous. It's just somebody talking at a camera. The things happen, and people like that authenticity, you know? So yeah, I think we got to challenge ourselves on those things as a church. Yeah.
Dancing is messy.
One of my favorite moments at Midway Hills was I was in charge of picking hymns, and I would never sing the tune. I would just read the lyrics. And there was one hymn, I couldn't tell you what it was. I could just tell you that it was not a traditionally Western meter. And it was hard to sing for a very white, older congregation in Dallas, Texas. But we did all three verses, struggling to do it and never getting it right. And at the end, the hymn finishes, and then everyone bursts out laughing. Not at the hymn itself, but our just horrible attempt at it. And once the laughter died down, someone says, "And God is praised." And that was our benediction that day, because what else can it be? So I love that, Nathan. That is fantastic. We do have a final question on the show, and I do want us to be cognizant of your time and our time and everyone's time. And thank you so much for being here. Spiff asks it beautifully.
And Nathan, yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show and introducing me to Footloose in a new way. Again, like I'd known it in theory, it's a part of the lexicon of life, but to sit down and really watch it was fun. It was fun to do last night. So thank you for that. And as you know, you got to pick the topic. So what biblical theme, verse, narration, characterization, I don't know anything, are you most reminded of in Footloose?
Good. Well, before I get to that, let me drop two last little nuggets for y'all.
Please.
That's fun to know about Footloose. One, Kevin Bacon, in his preparation for this role in Utah, he went and enrolled himself at a high school in Utah, even though he wasn't in high school age, but just to like spend a week and like re-experience that so he could bring his new kid acting chops to it. But also, fun fact, Rob Lowe heard about the movie and he started learning how to dance so he could audition. And he went to the auditions and worked his tail off, and injured himself during the audition, like was bad, like broke his leg or something like that. And then the producer said, "Oh, we decided to hire Kevin Bacon and bring in a dance double for him." So Rob Lowe was like, "What? Like, I went through all that trouble, and you could have just brought in a dance double."
So there's some big theology in that we can't get to now. Thanks.
yeah, fun stuff. But yeah, like I'm gonna go just what was recently, thinking that we just did the story of Thomas, but a couple weeks back, and we're doing in my church the narrative lectionary, so we're sort of worked our way through the Gospel of John, and a couple weeks back focused on Peter during Lent. I love the little vignettes of the disciples, because they show themselves to be really, really human, and show themselves to always be on a journey. And so, like, Thomas is inquisitive. He's wrestling. He's asking questions, but he is transformed. He's transformed when Jesus appears to him. Peter gets things wrong. Peter, says, "Oh, I'm gonna pull out my sword and fight to the death," and then abandons Jesus at a moment's notice. And so many of the disciples,
glitter.
Those stories, and so the years ago, I heard a great sermon by the late Gordon Crosby, founder of one of the founding pastors of the Church of the Savior in DC, which they do a lot of great social justice, very, very well-known community, have done a lot for their community. But he did this whole sermon one day, and I was there visiting, just checking them out, and it was on and on and on. It was all about Peter, how Peter got something right, then he got something wrong. Here he denied Jesus, he got it wrong, here he bandaged, and then he runs to the tomb first. That's great, but then like here he is helping divide the early church in Acts. He's playing along with the divisions, he's causing problems, and it went on and on. And I'm like, this guy's supposed to be a legendary preacher. Like, this is boring. Like, just pick one verse, just pick one passage, stick there. And then he says, the point of my sermon is discipleship is a lifelong journey. Sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't, but you got to keep going. You got to keep walking, and so to see the pastor in this movie on that journey, I think he's a little bit of a redemptive character, because here's a white male pastor who changes. And that's a miracle sometimes in this world in which we live. And more pastors, especially white male pastors, heterosexual, whatever, cis, we need to be able to change. We need to be able to be told that we're wrong, come to terms with that, deal with our stuff, and not bring any more harm into this world than we already have. And hopefully be about repairing those things that are harmed. So I think the disciples remind us that our journey is the same, and that for all of us, we're all on this journey, and we get things right and we get things wrong. And hopefully there's always an opportunity to be redeemed, to come back in. I mean, I love that Jesus, after Thomas expressed his questions, I won't believe this until I see his hands, and that Jesus, when Jesus comes back that next week, he goes right to Thomas. He doesn't give the side eye to Thomas, or doesn't awkward, but he just goes and says, Thomas, here I am. Here I am. That's powerful. That's grace,
So I'm going to go with Andy Bemis as the Apostle Andrew, because Andy Bemis says the most important thing in the entire movie, where he says, "You're the last folks I expected to see around here tonight." And actually, he also says the other thing, which is fire trucks can't cross the train tracks. It's not town. He's just kind of straightforward. And I was like, the only person I'd want to hang out with in that, the only two people are the pastor's wife and Andy Bemis, because Andy Bemis does not give a damn about a little tiny corner of the world. He sees a bigger picture, but that's what keeps people in community. So he'll give the kid from Chicago, who's super controversial, a job. He'll call out the pastor on his nonsense, but also kind of give welcome. And he'll easily say, "You have no power." So he's the best, and he's Andrew. Because evangelism is ultimately troublemaking. It is not yelling at people about hell.
Beautiful.
Oh, I love that. So I had two. I really couldn't pick one. I'm with you, Nathan. You and I are in the same vein. Thomas's hermeneutic of curiosity, I think, is, for me, that Kevin Bacon, why is this happening? What is, coming in and leaning into that curiosity as an ethic of life for the liberation of all people. I think, we like to, the church at large wants to say that Thomas's doubt is not the faithful part of that story, is not the good part of that story, but I like to say, but it is. If you are with all people who are just certain about all the same things all the time, you aren't doing the just and holy work of the gospel. And be the one that is curious, put your finger in the hole and say, what is this? What is happening? With consent. But the other part that I loved at the prom, at the actual dance that they have which isn't the actual barn dance, it's the secondary, right? Where are they? Do we know where they're let's actually,
they're at the Lehigh Mill, Andy.
Yeah.
Okay, so but there's that one moment in which those two boys hold hands behind the girl's head that is such a I can't imagine it's not some weird queer iconic moment in the 80s, because it is in this very white, very straight. I did not realize we were supposed to be rooting for an Ariel Ren connection, but we were. But in it, this guy has his arm up on a thing and the other guy comes down, and they clearly touch hands and neither of them move, and they just stand still. And I was like, ooh, cute gay moment. And I love all those little moments of this movie in which it's here's some gymnastics. Not that this is I'm not saying every gay thing. I'm saying the gymnastics is gay. I'm saying all the little moments of life that happen in the background of this movie are what make scripture and the gospel and life in beloved community worthwhile. And so I was reminded of all of the ways in which we read scripture and find those little nuances of connection that aren't explicit, but are very present, reminiscent in the movie, and in the ways in which little things happen, and in the little glances and the little touches that make even this very abstract movie very human.
Yeah, that soundtrack. And hey, by the way, did y'all notice at the end, it always drives me nuts too, that Kevin Bacon and his buddy, they get into that fight, the final fight, they got to throw in some redemptive violence in there, I guess. It's it's an American movie. It's got, and but then they just come back into the dance and they're like clean. They're not dusty. And, that's just, it's like, man, that is,
because as somebody who has fist fought at homecoming and had his jacket torn, I was really sad about that. And I was like, oh, good. I'm going to get to see Dirty Kevin Bacon lead group dancing, but that didn't happen.
Quick wardrobe
Dirty
change.
Kevin Bacon is your new band name.
Well, thank you. Reverend Nathan Hill, we thank you very much for being with us on 2-on-1. A reminder to our deuces out there that 2-on-1 is sponsored by Jeff Wonroe Designs. You can go to jeffwonroe.com and use the code 2-on-1, mostly letters, some numbers, for 15%, 2-on-115.
Yeah, I was like 2-on-15.
Or 15% off your entire store purchase. Nathan, thank you very much. We hope you'll come back and talk more 80s movies with us. I will say, nobody's done The Goonies yet.
And The Goonies was the first movie that got me in trouble as a youth minister, because I have it in my soul and in my love. And then I shared it to kids because I was like, it's a G-rated movie, and was like, oh, I've got some explaining to do.
So anyways, we will explain.
A great movie about class, class warfare, right? All right, I'm ready.
Of course, also the benefits of lifting your shirt and doing the truffle shuffle. On behalf of 2-on-1, I am the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall.
And I'm Reverend Nathan Hill. So glad to be with you all.
All right, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
All right, thank you.
Get more 2-on-1 at twoononeproject.com.